In this video, we're going to cover the single target and AoE strategies for Frost Mages. Let's start by talking about the single target strategy, beginning with the opener. Now this opener is in the context of a 5-man dungeon. On step 1, we want to cast Frostfire Orb. On step 2, we will cast either one Frostbolt or multiple Frostbolts until we have established that the tank is secured aggro. Once he has aggro on step 3, we'll cast our Water Elemental's freeze spell. This will grant us 2 charges of Fingers of Frost. This comes back to our improved freeze talent, which indicates that's how it behaves. On step 4, we'll use one of our Fingers of Frost charges to cast Deep Freeze, and on 5, we'll use our remaining Fingers of Frost charge to cast Ice Lance. Let's move on to the rest of the single target strategy. You can see on the screen right now we have a couple of bullets that apply to the single target strategy. Let's start at the first bullet. This bullet outlines our single target spell priority system. Give you a moment to look that over. It's important to always keep Deep Freeze on cooldown. It has a 30-second cooldown. After that, on 2, we want to keep Flame Orb, which is also referred to as Frostfire Orb, on cooldown. On 3, we want to keep our Water Elemental's freeze spell on cooldown. On 4, you want to cast Frostfire Bolt whenever Brain Freeze procs. On 5, use Ice Lance, and on 6, Frostbolt. Moving on to the next bullet, it talks about using mirror images during emergencies. Mirror images can do 2 things for you. 1, they can contribute to your DPS, and 2, they can serve as a temporary tank. Whenever mirror images are out and they're within the range of the mob, you won't be able to pull aggro off them, so it makes them a very viable emergency button. Moving on to the next bullet, this says consider integrating a cast to Icy Veins from within a macro. Icy Veins is a nice ability to keep on cooldown. As you can see, it does have a 2.4 minute cooldown, which is relatively short. Alternatively, as with trinkets and other DPS cooldowns, you can use it surgically and save it for specific situations where you need to maximize your DPS. But what I've done for the most part, and I've had fairly good results with it, is just to call it from within a macro. Let's demonstrate the single target strategy on a target dummy in Org. The first thing we want to do is get our pet out, and we're going to start off by casting Frostfire Orb, and in this situation we'll pretend like we're going to give our tank a couple of seconds to gain aggro. So we have a couple Fingers of Frost, Deep Freeze, Ice Lance, okay, Pet Freeze. As you can see, we do have a couple more charges. We have a Brain Freeze proc, we'll take advantage of that, and then go back to spamming Frostbolt until we have another proc. Okay, we just had a Brain Freeze proc, so we just casted Frostfire Bolt. There's another one, another Frostfire Bolt. Go back to spamming Ice or Frostbolt like this. Another Frostbolt, another Frostbolt. And as you can see, there's a big gap there where we didn't have any procs. Okay, Deep Freeze is up, we'll take advantage of that. Frostbolt, Ice Lance, Frostfire Bolt. We have another Fingers of Frost, take advantage of that with Ice Lance because we didn't have a Brain Freeze proc at that particular point. And then go back to our, okay, it looks like our Frostfire Orb is up. Also, Range Freeze, take advantage of Frostfire Bolt and a couple of Ice Lances. Go back to spamming Frostbolt like this. We have a couple Fingers of Frost, so we're going to cast a couple of Ice Lances, then go back to spamming our Frostbolt like this. And that really is the gist of the single target rotation for Frost Mages in a nutshell. Let's move on to the Frost Mage AoE strategy. We're going to talk about primarily 2 methods that you can use to conduct an AoE strategy as a Frost Mage, but the subject of AoE strategies for Frost Mages is so vast that we're not going to do any real justice, but at least we'll introduce you to the subject. We're not going to be able to demonstrate the entire Flame Strike / Cone of Cold AoE strategy, but we can only show you a little part of it. What you normally would do is the first thing you would do is gather the mobs in front of you. Once they're gathered, you would then cast Flame Strike, followed by Pet Freeze, and then instantly following that up with Cone of Cold. That's the only part we can really demonstrate of this strategy on these target dummies. Let's do it one more time though. We'll use, looks like we don't have Frost Nova, so we're actually going to use, I'm sorry, we don't have Pet Freeze, so we're going to use Frost Nova. So Flame Strike, Frost Nova, and then instantly follow that up with a Cone of Cold. Now the reason why, the thing about this strategy that's really important is that if you're going to hit the target with a weak spell like Cone of Cold, you want to make sure that you hit them while they're all frozen, the instant they're frozen. That's why ideally you'll use Flame Strike, Pet Freeze, and then immediately, like that, immediately hit them with Cone of Cold. In a real example, after you did this, you could then start spamming Arcane Explosion or something like that, but it really depends on the context. I mean, if you're kiting them after you did your Flame Strike, Cone of Cold, you would then start kiting them back and using Cone of Cold to keep them slowed. But that is the gist of the Flame Strike / Cone of Cold strategy. The other more commonly known AoE strategy for Frost Mages is called Blizzard farming. All it really amounts to is just spamming Blizzard on the target. It's also nice to use Pet Freeze in conjunction with it so that your Blizzard is striking, frozen targets. That way the critical strike chance is much, much higher. If you're lucky enough to be an engineer that has frost grenades, you can also refreeze a target from range and then cast another blizzard like this. As you can see, we're creating a lot more. But that's really all that blizzard farming amounts to at a very high level like that. And that wraps up our single target and AoE strategy discussions for Frost Mages. In the next set of videos, we're going to walk through a real-life example of how to play a Frost Mage in the context of a 5-man Zandalari dungeon.